This video is brought to you by Squarespace, the best place to easily create your own website and expand your online presence. Before he successfully resurrected Doctor Who in 2005, Russell T Davies had abandoned a Buffy the Vampire Slayer style series named Excalibur. However, when Doctor Who came back with great success, the showrunner was approached to create a post-Watershed adult series for BBC Three. Davies resurrected his Excalibur idea and retooled it for Doctor Who, resulting in Torchwood, a spin-off about a group of alien hunters in the heart of Cardiff who deal with an anomalous rift in space and time. This show was drastically different from the parent show, especially because it was shot in HD, which was still a very experimental format at the time. However, the main difference would be the more adult tone of the series, since the time slot allowed it to explore many darker themes compared to Doctor Who. Despite all these differences, Series 1 of Torchwood received mixed reviews, and has developed a pretty bad reputation over the years for being a bit too edgy. But is this reputation worth it? Or does Torchwood Series 1 have a lot more to offer than meets the eye? Well, I guess that's what we're here to find out. So it's time to go outside the government and beyond the police as we delve into the peaks and valleys of Doctor Who's first proper spin-off, Torchwood Series 1. And no, K9 and Company doesn't count because it was one failed pilot episode. Shut up before you make that comment. Torchwood came out swinging and revolutionised Doctor Who's TV presence. But do you know how you can revolutionise your website? By using Squarespace. Squarespace is a phenomenal service where you can build your own website from the ground up for whatever purpose you want. They even make it super easy to buy your own unique domain without any hidden fees or small print. Just go check out www.harbowholmes.co.uk to see what I was able to do with Squarespace. I'm far from a website guru and I was worried I'd be confused and lost, but I was able to make a website that looks really professional because Squarespace makes it simple with accessible tools and countless templates to help you get started. Not only can you host photo and video galleries, you can also keep a track of website analytics and set up things like mailing lists, so it's truly an all-in-one service. It even automatically makes your website mobile friendly to save you having to go in and do it yourself. I've tried website builders in the past, but nothing can compare to Squarespace. It's so straightforward and easy to use, so I really recommend going to squarespace.com/HarboWholmes right now for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. If you're a creative person like I am, having a website for your portfolio is vital these days, so be sure to give Squarespace a go and see what you can come up with. So a big thank you again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. And now, back to the review.
You didn't know whether someone was going to get shot in the face or whip their top off, so which is quite refreshing for a British drama.
I feel like I can't get into this without delving into the gigantic elephant in the room that is the sheer immaturity of Torchwood. The spin-off was intended to serve as an adult-oriented extension of Doctor Who, so you could essentially still partake in the universe even if you thought you were too grown up for the show. It's a great idea, and the darker tone of the show allows for excellent episodes like Out of Time, Countryside and Captain Jack Harkness, which all explore very nuanced themes in good ways. However, the main criticism of Torchwood in general is that it tries too hard to be edgy. Nothing quite exemplifies and justifies this criticism like Series 1, especially when episodes like Day 1 serve as a not so stellar introduction to the show, with an entire storyline revolving solely around death by Snoo Snoo.
When we're launching a new adult science fiction drama, it's kind of inevitable you're going to do the sex monster.
Indeed, so many episodes reek of a desperation to be cooler than Doctor Who, and it drags the series down quite a lot in my opinion. It tries so often to be sexy, but it feels so unnatural and forced, especially since they changed Mary and Greeks bearing gifts from a man to a woman for the sole purpose of Tosh being the only one to not have a same-sex kiss yet.
When I got the go-ahead to script, it was presented to me in terms of, yep, it's fine, everyone's really happy with the treatment, you're ready to go to script. One tiny change. Instead of a man, let's make him a woman. And I said, but he has an affair with Toshiko. Well, yes. And so that was it. So Toshiko, being the one last member of the Torchwood team not to have a same-sex kiss, suddenly there she was.
There she is.
However, I do think it's unfair that Series 1 has such a bad reputation, because I feel as though the maturity does outweigh the immaturity. So many great stories explore existential themes about life and death, and there are so many interesting episodes focusing on human horror and monstrosities, along with narratives about sexuality and gender identity, so it has a lot of very important topics to cover. But nothing Torchwood Series 1 could do could cover up the borderline childish, try-hard, edgy vibe, resulting in a very uneven tone with the types of stories it tells. themes. It definitely makes the show hard to get into, but personally I don't think they should be allowed to define the show as a whole, since series 1 is a result of teething issues, and they smooth things out quite a lot afterwards. However, you can really tell they wanted to differentiate from Doctor Who, because series 1 wouldn't stop swearing like a child who just learned naughty words.
Shit.
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 I clear up your shit.
Well, let's have shit.
Stop giving us that shit.
Just a crock of shit.
How come we get all the weevils and bollocks and shit?
These all look like shitholes to me.
You frighten the shit out of me, yeah.
Because I've taken some shit over the past few months. You tosser, you fucking tosser.
Language.
Fuck you! We're fucking heartless! What the fucking control!
You sick fuckers.
Sit the fuck down!
Who the fuck are you, anyway?
I am second in command. I have got every fucking right.
Okay, shut the fuck up, Gary.
Captain Jack is a hero, swashbuckler, he's a rogue.
Captain Jack Harkness was a popular character in his Doctor Who episodes, a fun and charming rogue who served as a charismatic contrast to the brooding Ninth Doctor. It's no surprise that he became the lead character of Torchwood. He fills this leadership role very well, having a lot of his own Doctor-like moments, since he too is this immortal and wise, enigmatic figure. The spin-off peers a little deeper into the psyche and traumatic past of Jack, which is much appreciated, showing you all the layers underneath and how he has his own struggles he hides from everyone else. He's not a perfect leader, and that shines through quite often, especially in the finale, so it makes him a more relatable character. Despite his Me Too worthy antics on set, John Barrowman is incredible throughout the entire series and encapsulates everything fans had come to love about Jack Harkness. He's an out-and-out action hero with many great moments, but the exploration of his immortality is the best part of his character, since the series dedicates a lot of time to the emotional effects of all his lives. Episodes like Small Worlds and Captain Jack Harkness do a superb job handling these themes, along with the character's guilt, so the character gets fleshed out incredibly well and becomes very three-dimensional and relatable, which allows him to be a better protagonist through and through. He's a good guide for Gwen, and tries to be a good boss whenever he can, but there are always very clear differences to the Doctor because he's used to operating solo. In tense situations like End of Days, he struggles to remain in charge of others because he's not used to responsibility of leadership. He wasn't exactly a two-dimensional character in Doctor Who, but Torchwood really gives you a deeper appreciation of Jack.
He's still got the same agenda, but he's a bit more of a darker character. He's not as giving as he was in Doctor Who.
Gwen Cooper is probably the out-and-out main protagonist of Torchwood, because she's the one we spend the most time with, the first and last character we see, and we experience pretty much everything through her eyes.
It's all about her engaging into this different world and accepting it and not screaming her face off and running out, you know.
It's quite clear what the writers were trying to do with Gwen. They wanted to make her a more adult version of a Doctor Who companion, facing similar themes and struggling to maintain a balance between her worlds, and serving as a human core to this team who are out of touch with humanity itself. The first 3 episodes are a very satisfying trilogy detailing her introduction to the organisation and how they operate. She has a sense of compassion the others lack, adding her own unique element to the team dynamic and a good outside perspective to everything, because she's that audience surrogate from the so-called real world, compared to Torchwood's alien world.
Gwen brings back the kind of heart to Jack.
You can see how her more personal approach shapes the team's outlook over the course of the series, and improves the organisation, because she always takes time to see the humanity of the situation, something that shines in Day 1 and Random Shoes. Eve Miles is great, but the biggest flaw about Gwen is how her flaws are never truly challenged. As I said, Gwen's main storyline is trying to keep her work and home lives separate, but this leads to the biggest problem with the character. She's fundamentally unlikable. At the beginning you can sympathise with this struggle, but then her treatment of boyfriend Reese and her affair with Owen makes you turn against her. This affair lasts most of the series, but it isn't ended because Gwen realises it's wrong, it's ended because Owen misses Diane too much. Gwen very rarely faces consequences for her actions, and it's frustrating to watch. End of Days presented a brilliant opportunity for this, since her involvement with Torchwood results in Reese's death, so it would have been a sobering wake-up call for Gwen, yet time just rewinds and brings him back, so she doesn't go through any character growth. Gwen is such a mixed character and it's disappointing, because you can see what they were aiming for, but they didn't balance her flaws or give her a proper character journey. She never gets called out for her selfishness, and that'll always annoy me severely. They really dropped the ball with this kind of protagonist.
Sit the fuck down!
However, an unlikable character who does get a significant character growth is Dr. Owen Harper, the medic of the team. Owen is such a deep and fascinating character. He's a thoroughly irredeemable arsehole for so much of the series, but Ghost Machine is an early character study to hint at there being more to him than meets the eye. Indeed, he goes from this womanizing prick to a very detailed and sympathetic character because of the last 4 episodes.
That rift took my lover and my captain.
By the time you get to him being exiled from Torchwood, you're fully behind him as a character, because he's in such a dramatically different place. Diane is the perfect foil to bring about this transformation because she teaches him so much about life and relationships, giving him another perspective so he starts to improve as a person. This sudden growth makes it easier to understand his motivations and struggles in the final episodes as he grapples with this loss and hopelessness. He goes from having nothing to lose to suddenly losing the most important person he's known for a long time, sending him on such a relatable downward spiral, finally having experienced positive emotions for once, just for them to be ripped away thanks to the Rift and Torchwood. I just think Owen is the best kind of character for a series like this. You're meant to hate him at the beginning, especially because one of his first actions in the show is essentially a non-consensual threesome, so it's obvious this character journey was designed like that from the very beginning.
But through the series we see him thaw, we see the real Owen. He has a hard outside, a soft inside.
Bern Gorman is incredible as a sleazy and jaded Owen, pulling off some admirable performances throughout the series. When you think about it, Owen essentially has the reverse journey of Gwen, almost becoming more human as the episodes go by, facing his own flaws and insecurities and bettering himself as a result. He's a good piece in the puzzle, even if he is sometimes a stereotypical, cynical and bitter character that seems remarkably common in shows like this.
And why is it that only Gwen seems to have a heart? Yeah, I don't know if you've noticed, but the rest of us are human.
He has his own unique place in the team, and that character evolution makes him a worthwhile member of Torchwood, especially because he calls out Jack on his own flaws in the finale, playing a vital role in the events of that story. Unfortunately, with a show like this, not all the members of the cast will get equal representation. This is sadly the case for Toshiko Sato and Yanto Jones, who see significantly less screen time and development as their peers, fading into the background more often than not. That being said, I really do like Tosh. She has some really strong moments throughout and transcends being their typical brainy nerd character. Captain Jack Harkness has moments which show both her unrivaled brilliance, but also her own insecurities, because she has to face racism in the World War II setting.
Where's George dancing with the Jap?
Greek's Barren Gifts also highlights her insecurities since she feels outcast by the team, becoming easy prey for Mary to exploit. It's a shame Tosh is such a side character because there's a lot of potential with her. Even Series 2 doesn't do as much with her as it should. And last but not least, we have Yanto, who is by far the least developed character, only really having Cyberwoman to show his worth. Despite being stellar in that episode, which turns his lack of presence into a plot point, nothing really happens with Yanto for the rest of the series, aside from shagging Jack off screen. His clash with Owen and Captain Jack Harkness is wonderful, but that's the most he really gets, a huge shame. He's just the butler, the tea-boy, but luckily he would get fleshed out a lot more in Series 2 and 3. You can't give every member of the team the same footing, so it's not surprising that Yanto is more of a side character. You kind of need characters like that for the series to work, which is why Reese and PC Andy are also wonderful characters for a multitude of reasons, especially because they keep the show tethered to reality whenever they're involved. They're both from that main world Gwen is used to, so they remain an outside perspective as she slips further into Torchwood's world. Andy doesn't get used much, but Reese is a constant presence, always challenging Gwen and calling her out.
Reese.
God, you selfish bitch!
I really like Reese because of this. He doesn't just go along with it. Although, as I said, Gwen herself never has to face any consequences. You end up feeling bad for Reese, since he deserves a lot better, although that probably wasn't intentional.
I bet sex with him is better than with the others. Weird.
The characters are only one element of the series, however. This is a Doctor Who spin-off, so you'd expect there to be a laundry list of memorable monsters and villains. Well, Torchwood Series 1 would be a huge disappointment in that department. Their first proper monster of the show is sex gas. Plain and simple.
Kind of went, oh, sex gas, okay.
It's inexcusable and immature. This bright pink gas which possesses a girl and makes her kill via orgasm. Sure, it's memorable, but for all the wrong reasons. Because it's both comical and desperately trying too hard to be adult. Similarly, the partially converted Lisa in Cyberwoman is also shockingly bad because of how awful the sexualized design is. The story they're trying to tell of her is great because of this battle between her humanity and cyber programming. But the design makes it impossible to fear her since they give her a metal bra and panties. You can't put someone in that getup and expect the audience to be terrified like they are of the actual Cybermen in the main show. It just doesn't work. Small Worlds also introduces the worst villain in the entire show, bad CGI. Even though the fairies are written well with gruesome kills and a creepy design, the CGI just looks terrible. I adore how they're ancient all-powerful beings predating humanity and capable of easily beating Torchwood who can't deal with them, but it's just hard to vibe with them when they're so badly animated. Similarly, Abaddon is truly awful in every sense, because the design and CGI is abysmal, it's unforgivable, especially because it's so pointless in the first place. An uncalled for antagonist at the end of the finale which doesn't really do anything and then dies. I hate it so much. To be brutally honest, the Weevils are probably the best traditional monster, because their design is great. A creepy practical monster suit to communicate their primal animalism and alien nature. They're brutal killers and appear pretty often in the series, so they're essentially the cornerstone monster of the show, despite rarely being the main focus. I just think the Weevils are a great continuous presence in Series 1, although it's probably just mainly because all the others were so bad. The monsters of Series 1 are a huge letdown, mainly because of the CGIs and designs, but something I neglected to mention was the amount of human villains there are as well. Torchwood heavily explored human corruptibility, which comes through with great human monsters like the sinister Ed Morgan in Ghost Machine, the Nonce in Small Worlds, and the morally twisted Mark in Combat. Marrying Reeks bearing gifts is both alien and a human, and even though her alien design is pretty good, she's mainly in a human guise, and is a very conniving, manipulative villain, whispering poison into Tosh's ear for great effect. There's also the corrupted Torchwood member Susie Costello in Everything Changes, and They Keep Killing Susie, who started off as a normal person, but was driven mad by the futility of Torchwood's work and the evil in the universe. She's great in the opening episode, but then her return is botched by having her more of an out-and-out villain in the traditional sense. However, the best example of humans being monsters is the cannibal village in Countryside. They're so perfectly monstrous because they're completely human, yet trap and eat their fellow kind for fun. It's such a shocking revelation because of how twisted they are. It's hard to comprehend what could even drive someone to this kind of behaviour, a focal point of the ending of that story. Lastly, there's the peculiar case of one Billis Manger, the enigmatic dancehall owner in Captain Jack Harkness, who is then revealed as a sinister puppet master in End of Days. Billis is incredible, and the only problem is that we didn't get more of him, since Murray Melvin's performance is so delightfully devilish, and I love how mysteriously ambiguous he was for most of his screen time. He's an unstoppable, all-knowing threat, and it's just a shame we couldn't have even more Billis. But as always, Big Finish comes in clutch, as to be expected. The episodes of Torchwood Series 1 are an incredibly mixed bunch, which is pretty common knowledge at this point. This series gets off to a very hopeful start with Everything Changes, a fantastically written episode by Russell T Davies which uses the same blueprint as Doctor Who Series 1 did, setting up a great mystery regarding Torchwood and specifically Captain Jack. It works so well as an introduction and establishes Gwen as a realistic and relatable protagonist, along with showing the darker and more grounded tone of the spin-off with human villains. However, Day 1 is Day 1. It's the most infamous episode because of one reason. sex gas, which I've already spoken about.
That's Chris Chibnall, that's what he came up with, a sex gas orgasm eating monster. How can you not watch that?
It also sets the immature tone for the series. It's a desperately edgy and sexed up script capable of making Stephen Moffat blush. But there are still some positives, like how it serves as a trial by fire for Gwen, a chaotic first day in the team, but nothing the episode does will ever make you forget it's the one with sex gas. Despite this, Ghost Machine puts the show back on track with a wonderfully chilling and impactful story about experiencing the horror of the past and how it can eat away at someone, along with showing how dangerous knowledge of the future can be. Day 1 tried too hard to be edgy and ended up being immature, but Ghost Machine is a great proof of concept for the possibilities of the spin-off. But then comes the curious case of Cyberwoman, the second most infamous episode of the series, almost entirely due to the costuming of the titular villain. However, even though it's very difficult to look past this costume, I think the story has a lot to offer and contains a brilliant character study of Yanto, bringing him to the forefront and examining his character motivations. He's at the fringes of the team, so they take that and twist it into a hard-hitting narrative about his desperation to save his girlfriend, even if it costs him his team or his life. It sets up a lot of dissension for the finale, the first episode to really start sowing these seeds of the team breaking apart. There's tense drama and a great base under siege feeling, so there's definitely something enjoyable there. It's just ruined by the terrible, sexy Cyberman Halloween costume. Small Worlds is a divisive and often despised episode, but I've never quite been able to work out why. I've always thought it successfully explores some dark themes of human horror, along with handing a massive L to our protagonists, to show how fallible they are as both individuals and as a team unit, sowing seeds of dissension which would blossom chaotically in the finale. Sure, the fairies look a bit terrible, but it's a great sci-fantasy episode that left a lasting impact on a young Harbo with some very creepy moments. What comes next though is far from divisive, because Countryside is hands down the greatest script Chris Chibnall has ever contributed to the Doctor Who universe. What a phenomenal episode. Such a perfect horror story that shows how truly distressing the show is capable of being. Even though it falls into a bunch of tropes, it's a thrilling ride from start to finish which subverts your expectations in a good way. The cast are wonderful, especially Owen Teale as the leader of this cannibal village. It's a gruesome, unforgettable episode, the gold standard of Torchwood in my opinion. It would always be hard to follow on from this episode, but I think Greeks Bearing Gifts does a good job doing so. It's another exploration of the corruptibility of the human race, along with giving Tosh a lot of much needed character development as she is manipulated by the villainous and toxic Mary inside this emotionally abusive relationship. On top of all of this, it still delivers a good story about power we shouldn't wield, looking at how omniscient knowledge can overwhelm and erode someone's sanity, so it's a great dive into the reality of superpowers. I think it's a great analogue for controlling relationships where someone cuts their partner off from their entire life and makes them dependent, once again showing how Torchwood can weave so many deeper themes into seemingly surface level and simple episodes. They Keep Killing Susie is the most disappointing episode of Series 1. I loved how Susie was characterised in Everything Changes, and her return initially seemed to continue this characterisation, telling this existential tale of life after death, seeing everyone in your life move on and replace you, along with hinting at the terror of the beyond and our natural fear of the afterlife, or lack thereof. However, it then takes a complete nosedive as it turns Susie into some mastermind villain who orchestrated this grand scheme all along, so it all becomes a bit generic and a hugely disappointing way of wrapping this story up. A massive letdown that always rubs me the wrong way. But if all of this darkness and cynicism of the show is getting you down, Random Shoes proves to be an underrated diamond in the rough, with a truly touching and beautiful story about embracing life and learning to love what you have, no matter who you are. Eugene is characterised well and the narrative is explored in an interesting way, with him being this ghost solving his own death, allowing for a very low-key and character-heavy story to be told. Out of Time is also an incredibly character-focused episode, which really breaks your heart with how it ends. All these characters having to let go of these people they've formed tight connections with, especially Owen, who begins his redemption arc as he loses Diane, who had made him change for the better.
The thing about love is that you're always at its mercy.
Much like Random Shoes, there is no villain or monster, it's just a great narrative. 3 people being catapulted into their far future with no way home, and having to deal with this new world, 3 different generations to display different experiences. It's one of Torchwood's best episodes, and adds so much to the overall character journeys of the team, setting major events into motion and shaping entire characters like Owen, influencing what he does in the finale.
We're relieving you of your command, Captain! We're opening that rift and getting back what we lost!
Combat is essentially a part 2 to Out of Time, picking up the plot threads by continuing to focus on Owen now that Diana's left, really diving deep into the character and how troubled he is underneath his snarky personality. It's another well-crafted, mature story despite being a bit too heavily influenced by Fight Club, and also being Torchwood's We Live in a Society episode. There are some slick sequences and the focus on Owen is appreciated, but it's a bit of a middling episode that gets lost in the pack. However, an episode that doesn't face this fate is Captain Jack Harkness, a phenomenal story with so many talking points. At first, it's an interesting setup of our charismatic leader being faced with the man he took his name from, but then it diversifies into a wonderfully tragic exploration of identity, and how the original Captain Jack is struggling with his sexuality in the 1940s.
He hadn't lived. Of any of us.
Almost every aspect of the episode is spot on. A perfect team episode giving every character something to do, since there's a timey-wimey treasure hunt, and the character conflicts segue very well into the finale, as Owen takes the massive risk of opening the rift and threatening the entire world as a result. Indeed, End of Days picks up from this and is pretty much 75% of a great finale. It does so many things exceptionally, showing the team collapsing and infighting, but it all culminates with the unnecessary appearance of Abaddon, who derails the story significantly. It's a mostly satisfying finale because of the character dynamics and the wonderful bridge back to Doctor Who Series 3, but the climax of Abaddon is almost insultingly rushed, so it's a bittersweet way to end the first series. I think, in total, the episodes are a good variety, highlighting what Torchwood has to offer. Sometimes they fall into the trap of feeling like generic police procedural shows, but I actually think that's a good thing every now and then, since it reminds you of the grounded nature of the show. I feel like the episodes cover all the topics the spin-off was aiming for, and it keeps a running undercurrent of great drama all the way through. It's a show about alien hunters in Cardiff, and I think the series goes above and beyond with adding actual substance and variety to the episodes, rather than something like ITV's Demons, but that's a story for another time. Now that we're near the end of this video, I want to explore 2 questions a number of people have often posed about Torchwood. Did it work? And was it necessary? First of all, yes it did work. Torchwood set viewership records on BBC 3, the most watched show the channel had ever seen at that point, so the demand was clearly there due to Doctor Who's own runaway success. Also, the fact it had 4 series and people would never stop asking for it to return serves as a testament to how successful Torchwood was. So now to the other, more complex question. Was Torchwood necessary? Personally, I think it was. As I touched upon at the beginning, the spin-off was designed as a branch of Doctor Who to retain older, more adult audiences, who might not care for the main show anymore, which certainly points to why it reached such a massive audience.
So it's a chance for us to get an adult audience and to tell stories that touch on the darker sides of humanity.
However, one of the best things about Torchwood is how it managed to keep itself relatively distant from Doctor Who. Some people watching at the time didn't even know it had anything to do with that show. Sure, Series 1 keeps itself pretty anchored to the main show, but it still has that much needed separation that allows it to do its own thing within the same universe. It works well as a grounded spin-off set in one location established in Doctor Who, and even uses a character from Doctor Who as the main attraction, but it's a completely different show both in format, directing and tone. The team dynamic is a lot more fresh because there is a wider cast rather than just 2 or 3 leads like in the main show. It had to change up how the characters are used and how they interact, so there's a better variety in there, and also I think the directing is a massive departure from how Doctor Who was directed. Even though the editing is a bit overly flashy and trying a bit too hard sometimes, the episodes have a very distinct look to them. There's never any doubt as to what kind of show this is, and the atmosphere is always strong. There are some absolutely stunning scenes along with good uses of lighting. Cyberwoman as an episode looks incredible, especially with the body horror of the partially converted scientist. However, the primary reason I think Torchwood was necessary is the storytelling. All the stories excel without the constraints of Doctor Who, since they don't need to appeal to a family audience, and can freely explore darker themes in more explicit and graphic ways, something both the talented writers and directors embrace. Along with all the horror and adult content, it's a fairly progressive series, since all the characters are fluid with their sexuality without that defining them, so it's nice to have characters like this back in 2006, where there was a huge lack of representation in mainstream television. I think it did a lot to show that you can be cool action heroes no matter who you're attracted to, normalising diverse casts.
Let's get into a sort of more modern mentality of being relaxed, of barriers coming down. Let's push the story further by making it a gay relationship without making it a gay story.
With a universe as expansive and ripe for storytelling as Doctor Who, spin-offs like this are absolutely crucial, which is also why I really like Class, but that's an entire other video I made. Things like Torchwood can allow you to see a brand new perspective of the show and make the world bigger and more fleshed out. So Torchwood Series 1 played a vital part in making Doctor Who so successful in 2006 and 2007, since it was new and fresh, something different yet familiar. Regardless of what you think about the immaturity of Torchwood, it's hard to deny it was an interesting addition to the universe, so it was absolutely a necessary spin-off to introduce, and it worked incredibly well with what it wanted to do, which was tell more mature, darker stories. Doctor Who could never spin a narrative like Countryside with the same impact, so I think that episode alone shows how beneficial Torchwood is to the universe. Unlike the parent show, Torchwood could let loose with swearing, blood, substances and sex, amplifying new styles of storytelling the family-oriented Doctor Who was forced to avoid. It goes too far in some places, but overall it's a massive boon to the series, really pushing the limits of the Doctor Who universe, although some of the 90s Doctor Who books were a bit edgier and more immature, somehow. Personally, I just dig the mid-2000s leather jacket grungy vibe, so I'm probably the main target audience for Torchwood, which explains a lot. If you asked a group of different Doctor Who fans what they think about Torchwood, you will get varying responses. The show itself is polarising, but Series 1 is possibly the most divisive of the bunch, since most people unanimously hate Miracle Day. However, I don't think Series 1 deserves the amount of flack it seems to receive. It's undeniable that there was an amateurish sheen of immaturity at times with stories like Day 1. Almost all of the episodes in the series are very enjoyable and thought-provoking in different ways. It's very different to Doctor Who, and that's immediately obvious, since it never tries to hold your hand too much and rely on fans of the main show. It has its own identity, and I respect that a lot. The acting is almost always spot on, with a great cast of main characters who almost all have their own motivations and journeys throughout the series. The biggest drawback in my opinion is the rogues gallery of monsters, because they're let down by bad CGI and dodgy designs. Unlike Doctor Who, this was shot and broadcast in HD, so the low budget CGI animation is more glaring than it ever was in the main show at the same time, making the monsters in Torchwood look even worse. The Rift is a good gimmick to base the series around, and Torchwood itself is a great organisation to follow. There are some good stories featuring them as an overall presence, and it does a lot to set itself apart from UNIT. Personally, I would rank Torchwood Series 1 at a B on the Torchwood tier list. The lows are very low, but there's a lot of quality in there that gets overlooked. Catherine Tregenna is probably the best writer of Series 2, with two incredible scripts in Out of Time and Captain Jack Harkness. She really seemed to understand the potential of the spin-off and its characters. It's a much needed show to capitalise on the success of Doctor Who, expanding the universe in such a wonderful way. It's far from the best series of Torchwood, and it takes a while to get into its groove, but I absolutely think Series 1 is worth watching, especially because it gives you a new appreciation for the next two series, which improve dramatically on pretty much every front. And I'd like to give a very special thank you to all my gold level patrons: Alex Marston, Calvin, Daniel Shillito, Franz Horn aka Line Vortex, George, John, Ross, Stefanik Never Miller and William Jewell. Thank you so much for your support.